Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very, very senior and accomplished professional from Shanghai, China, Mr. Jamie Dixon. Jamie, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. It's very nice to be with you today.
Jamie is a leadership coach and trainer, and he's an author. He's an author of 3 books. So, Jamie, before we start talking coaching, tell me a little bit about your own journey and what took you to China 16 years ago.
So 16 years ago, I had just graduated from university and I was working in a coffee shop, which is not really what you want to be doing after you've just graduated from university. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. I just knew I didn't want to work in this coffee shop. And so after an argument with my girlfriend one day and being scolded for making rubbish coffees at the same time, I just thought, to hell with this. I need to get away. And I knew that going to teach English abroad was a very good option for someone like myself. So I submitted my CV to Teaching English as a Foreign Language website. A few hours later, I calmed down and thought, maybe I'm overreacting. But the next morning when I woke up, I had job offers from all over the world.
Okay.
And any one of these job offers would have been so much better than going back and working in the coffee shop. And so long story short, I accepted one in China and they needed me there 3 weeks later. And so everything happened in such a rush. I had to break up with my girlfriend, quit my job, move back home for a little while, go to London, get the visa, get everything else sorted. I didn't have time to think about what I was doing. And it was only a few weeks later after I'd arrived in China that I realized, oh crap, I'm in China. So that's how I came to China.
Amazing.
And I started as an English teacher, worked as an English teacher for a few years, learned Mandarin on the side, used that to work my way into corporate, did that for a few years. Decided I prefer working with corporates from the outside instead of the inside. Left and started as a trainer and leadership coach. And that's where I'm at today.
Amazing. Amazing. So, when I was reading about you, you state that Chinese culture has had a profound impact on your thinking. Help me understand what aspects of Chinese culture have impacted you and give me some examples.
So one aspect is just the practical nature of their thinking. As an example, I've worked with a lot of international training companies delivering their leadership development programs over here. And I've noticed a very big difference between how training is designed in Europe or America and what the Chinese are expecting. And in Europe and America, the tendency is to start with, a bit of theory, why is this important and what should we do exactly? And then the how part is a discussion and you've got to go figure out the how part on your own. Whereas in China, the how part is the most important thing. That's all they care about. And they don't want to waste time with all of this discussion about theory and thinking things through. Tell me how I solve my goddamn problems. That is what they care about the most. And you see this in a lot of aspects of Chinese culture. I mean, I remember when I first came to China, I went up the Jin Mao Tower in Shanghai, which at the time was the 4th tallest building in the world. And 6 months later, I went back to that same area and there was another skyscraper just opposite, which was even taller and wasn't completed the last time I was there. They just do things at a ridiculous pace. So they're all about execution over here, just doing. And I really appreciate that. And I'd say the other thing I really appreciate is the pragmatism of the Chinese people. And there's a great saying from Deng Xiaoping, the ex-Chinese leader, that it doesn't matter if a cat is black or white, so long as it catches rats. And that is pragmatism in a nutshell. It's about letting go of ideology and just focusing on results. And so, I won't go into politics or anything, but that's one thing. That's one thing I've appreciated about living in China.
That's
Yeah, I don't have to have political conversations with
Oh,
people.
absolutely.
Just
And
focus on practical.
my podcast platform is not a political platform at all. So,
Mm,
JV, moving on now about coaching. I started working for British American Tobacco when I was 79, in 1979, when I was 22 years old. And I remember in those days in early 80s, coaching or mentoring was done either by a family elder or
mm,
by someone senior in a company who took a liking to you.
mm,
What has changed in the world of coaching that it has become a profession and people are willing to pay for it?
mm. That's a good question. And I came to the profession a lot later than you first encountered it. So I didn't see I didn't see it in those earlier days.
Hmm.
I think for example, of a lot of local companies, I remember I used to work I used to work for Amway China,
Mhm.
and Amway China's business model is, your friends or family members sell you their products,
Yeah.
and you can build a business that way. And so a lot of the Amway distributors or salespeople were people from out in the countryside who had very limited education.
Mm.
And Amway wanted to do a really, really thorough job in training them up. And I
Mm.
remember introducing the concept of coaching to one of these people.
Mm.
And they were like, so hang on a minute, I pay you and all you do is ask me questions? It doesn't make any sense.
Mm.
And so there is a lot of that mindset. And I would say coaching is a lot more widespread in the international companies than the local
Mm.
companies.
Mm.
I think because there's still that mindset of, I just want to do things. I don't have time to learn things. I'm just interested in doing.
Mm.
I think in the more international companies, you have people who have naturally been exposed to different ways of thinking, and a lot of thought leaders from US, for example, where I think that is probably the capital of leadership development in the world.
Mhm. Mm.
And they recognize that, thinking, being able to get your thinking straight gives
Mm.
you an edge in a
Mm.
competitive world, because it's very, very easy to, it's like taking off an airplane. If you want
Mm.
to fly from Shanghai to New Delhi, you got to take off at the right angle. If
Correct.
you get the angle wrong very early on in the flight, you go to the Arctic or
Mm.
somewhere else.
Mm.
And I think that's what coaching helps people with.
Mm.
It helps them get the right angle on their thinking and think things through. And
Mm.
people recognize that this is an edge in an extremely competitive world,
Wonderful.
and that they need help. It's
Mm.
not easy.
Wonderful. Thank you for a great response. So, Jamie, you're a leadership coach.
Mm.
How do you define leadership?
How do I define leadership? That's a very good question. I think leadership has several aspects to it, but I think for me, the part I'm most interested in, is the people part, the
Mhm.
people side of things.
Mm. Mm.
And there's also things about strategy and business acumen. Those are very important parts of leadership, but I'm not so interested in those parts.
Mhm.
So for me, the people side of leadership is about being able to get people aligned, get them on board, and get them working in the same direction.
Mm.
And there's all sorts of ways of achieving that, but that's ultimately what it's about. And
Mm.
it requires that a leader is able to articulate their vision, articulate a clear direction, build relationships with people, and motivate people in the way they need to be motivated
Mm.
in the right time, and so on. So it's about bringing people on board, getting them together, and getting them all working towards a
Mm.
common direction.
Mm.
That's what the people side of leadership means to me.
Wonderful. And as a leadership coach, based on all your experience, are leaders born or are they made?
I think it's a bit of both.
Mhm.
I think you can definitely make yourself a leader. I think there are certain traits that some people are born with that make it easier for them to become leaders. But I think it's open to everyone. One thing I'm very interested in at the moment is how systems create the conditions for certain people or certain personality types to rise to the top. And I think this is something that probably needs more research going forward, because it will be a very important part of just leadership in general, both on an organizational level and a political level, but creating the right conditions so that you get the right kind of people in place. Because in a lot of corporations, you see that the people sometimes who rise to the top are basically psychopaths sometimes. And not all the time, but if you have an environment where you reward people with big egos and it's a cutthroat culture, then those are the kinds of people who will rise to the top. So if you change the conditions, you change the environment, different types of people will rise to the top. So going back to your question, I think there are some traits that some people are born with that give them an advantage in particular contexts. But I believe everyone is capable of developing their own leadership skills and a leadership style that will thrive in particular contexts. Not every context, but in particular contexts.
Well said. My next question to you is that, given the amazing background you have had, from working in a coffee shop in the UK to landing up to teach English in China, to the corporate world, to becoming a coach, how has your own background supported your coaching philosophy, your style, and your values?
I think a big part of my background that has helped me a lot is just how much I was able to learn in my early years in China and where that took me from and to. So before I came to China, I was, I had come from a very middle-class background in England with a strong culture of complacency. There's no need to better yourself and, why get rich? Why work hard? You see people in sports cars and your first reaction is, oh, well, clearly they're a horrible person. That's the kind of culture I came from. And that's the kind of culture I brought with me to China. And the education system I went through, I don't think it really helped me a lot. It didn't help me to thrive at all. It convinced me I was stupid. So I came to China as this complacent child who thought they were stupid. And in 3 months, I surprised myself because I was suddenly conversational in Mandarin. And I thought I was stupid. I had no drive. But in 3 months, I've become conversational in a language so many people say is the hardest language to learn in the world.
Correct.
And so that gave me a bit of spark to just go out and do things and try things. And I guess being a foreigner in China, you're naturally weird anyway. So it doesn't matter what you do, people are still going to think you're weird. So that just gave me more confidence to just try new things and make lots of mistakes. Like I remember I once, when I was learning Mandarin, I once spent 2 hours walking up and down the street just asking random strangers what the time was. And then they'd say something, did I get that? And I'd go back and check my book and then, okay, I think I've got it. And within 2 hours, I'd learned how to tell the time.
Nice.
So that experience of realizing that, I used to think I was stupid and I've just learned something, and doing that through experimenting taught me the value of that, of believing in yourself and experimenting, basically learning through playing, trying things, seeing what happens. And so that's a mindset I bring with me to my coaching, because I find a lot of people in corporations have been kind of institutionalized into thinking that there's one particular way of doing things. I'm not good enough to do this particular thing. This is the only way of doing things. So I encourage people to play and try something and see what happens, and believe in yourself a bit more and look back on your achievements and give yourself the praise that you deserve, and raise your ambitions a little bit. So that's how my background's shaped.
Fantastic. My next question to you, that all of us, Jamie, have had people who influence us in our lives. And a lot of these influences we take into coaching relationships that we have with our coachees. How are you shaped by people in your life, and how are they influencing you as a coach?
I'd say my wife has had the biggest influence on me.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a part of, I'd say she's been a big part of that transformation from this lazy, complacent, stupid boy to someone with drive. And a lot of people tell me that they see me as having strong drive and being very disciplined. And my wife has definitely helped with that transformation. She has high expectations. She pushes me, and she basically kicks my ass. And for some people listening to this, they're like, they're probably thinking, why would you want to marry that? And that's exactly why I'd want to marry that, because she has made me into a better person. She's made me into she's helped me realize my potential. So having her constantly encouraging me, supporting me, and pushing me to do even better in my career, she has had the biggest influence on my career, I would say, and life in general.
Fascinating. One more question about coaching, and then I'll move to your books. You had very nicely articulated the culture that you came from in the UK, and then you came into this culture in China, which is, again, completely different. My question is, what, in your view, is the impact of culture on coaching?
The impact of culture on coaching. So I think it can impact things in a lot of ways. I think one way in which it impacts people is their expectations. So I find working with Europeans and Americans, for example, they are more aligned with the expectation that the role of a coach is to ask questions and to help you to reflect and facilitate that. In China, where I work, there's a lot of people I've worked with who expect me to be more of an advisor, and still do the questioning, etc. But they run out of patience with that very, very quickly. And I think that comes probably from Confucian culture, where you have this sense of hierarchy and order, and the teacher has a very important role in this culture, and they are right. And if you want to get an answer, go to the teacher. So there's still that mindset in coaching. So I think it influences people's expectations. And I think as well, probably trust and openness. Trust is a very big factor in culture that I see is very different. I notice in a lot of Western cultures I go to, trust pretty much starts at 100%. You are a coach, so I trust you. Whereas in China, at least, I imagine this might be the case in India as well, I'm not sure, but in China, at least, trust doesn't start at 100%. It might start at like 20 or 30%, and you have to build it up and work very hard to build it up. Right. So that process of establishing trust can take a lot longer, and just shows the importance of the relationship part of coaching as well.
Well said. Let me now move to your books. You're an author of 3 books. Tell me about your books. But before that, tell me, are these books available on Amazon and other platforms?
Yeah, they are available on Amazon, all available on Amazon. So there's a common thread linking all 3 of my books, which is about behavior change. And the first one is called Shaping Paths, How to Design and Deliver Practical Training. And that started from what I was talking about earlier, where I had these Chinese participants who were asking me, how do you make this practical? How do I use this? And were not happy with the kind of training I was delivering. And so that was a 6-year process writing that book to research how to make things practical. And it took me to a lot of different fields around user experience design, product design, all sorts of things around psychology, etc. And a long story short, if you want to make training practical, design it around tools like checklists, process, templates, etc. That way, the training becomes a lot more streamlined. Everything is about how to use the tool. You've learned how to use the tool, practice using the tool, and then after training, take away the tool and use the tool, and that increases the chances of transfer. And I find that approach goes down very, very well. But it took me 6 years to figure out that was how to make training practical. And that got me interested in behavior change, because in that process there was a lot of things I read about behavior science and habits and so on. So as I was starting to write my third book, which is about storytelling, I spent a year doing the research and around that book and figuring out the ideas I wanted to focus on in that book. And I'd got a lot faster at writing books. My first one took me 6 years. 4 of those years were the research process. Now for this book, it's taken me 1 year to do the research process. So after I finished the research, I was talking to one of my friends, Yuri, and I told him I've got a lot faster at writing books. And he said, why don't you take that experience and just, create an online course or something, or another book telling people how to do things faster. And so I said, okay, I'll take that challenge. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write a book in 24 hours. And so in early 2021, I locked myself away in a hotel for 2 days. And I was very active on social media. I had a lot of people following me during this process. And basically in a total of 15 hours, I wrote, edited, and published a book. It's a very short book, a lot shorter than the first book. But it was a really, really great experience to write that.
Amazing.
And that book is called Overcome and Get It Done. And it's all about productivity principles and how to change your own behavior. And so after that one, I went back to finish off my third book, which is called The Story Habit. And The Story Habit is all about storytelling, but it's about the bigger picture of storytelling. Because a few years ago, I had a lot of clients all of a sudden start asking me for storytelling training. It had become this massive buzzword in the corporate world.
Yeah,
I was a little bit confused as to why you want to train engineers to tell stories. Surely that would overcomplicate their reports. And I realized that what they actually want is they want their engineers and anyone they have to be able to communicate with more meaning, to make whatever message they're getting across stick in people's memories, and to help change people's minds, and ultimately to drive people to action. So as I was doing a lot of research into storytelling, I realized that the bigger picture of storytelling is it's not about how to tell stories, it's about how to influence meaning. And story is also a metaphor for how we understand the world around us, our understanding of our role in society, companies, how money works. These are all stories. And there's a lot of parallels between how to tell stories and how these stories work.
Correct.
So that's the focus of the third book.
Well said. So I'm going to ask all our viewers and listeners to go and check out J.B. Dixon's books on Amazon. I'll go and check them out myself.
Thank you.
Give me a last question to you, and this is for the thousands of people who will listen to our conversation. Based on your own amazing journey and all the incredible learnings you've already had, and you just mentioned you're in the process of moving back to the UK, what would you say are 3 lessons you would want our viewers and listeners to take away from your journey?
I would say one lesson is to remember that we learn by playing. If you look at children or animals, the only way they learn is by playing. And playing is not necessarily about having fun. It's about trying new things and seeing what works. And just do that. That's how I've got the most benefits and fastest growth in my life, just by trying new things and seeing what works. And a lot of things don't work, but some things do work.
Correct.
So I think that would be one lesson. And I think another lesson is who you think you are is not who you could be. The future you the you in 1 year's time, the you in 5 years' time, the you in 10 years' time could be so different to the you that you think you are right now. So don't let the story that you tell yourself about yourself hold you back from being the self that you can be. And I think if I can pick a third lesson, I think it would be about meaning. And if you want to influence people in your life, which is, regardless of what age you're at, influencing others is going to be an essential skill. And the further you go up in your career, the more you need to influence others. And a key skill to influence others is to understand the meaning of things to the people you're trying to influence. What are their beliefs about this? What are their motivations? What experience has shaped the meanings that they have about these things? And relate to where they're at. Because if you want to, everyone has their own story about the way things are. And if you want to shape that story, you have to learn that story first.
Correct.
Learn what things mean to people. And then you can start shaping that meaning for them.
Wonderful. And on that note, Jamie, and your 3 amazing lessons, which is the first one you said was we learn by playing, try new things and see what works. Second one you said was who you think you are is not who you could be, which is such a powerful statement. And the third one is to influence people, you need to understand the meanings of what is relevant to others. Thank you so much for speaking to me about your own journey. Thank you for speaking to me about coaching. Thank you for sharing with me so much more information about your own books. Thank you also for explaining to me how important storytelling is in the lives of everybody. Thank you again for speaking to me, and good luck with your move back to the UK.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.